The wildest travel experience I think I had was a trip to Ethiopia. We were in Jinka, which is over near the South Sudanese border. I had a trusted guide, had my teenage daughter in the back seat, woke up at dawn, drove about 2.5 hours towards the South Sudanese border to see the Mursi tribe. Sun's rising over the mountains and it looked like something out of Jurassic Park. There was nothing, just dirt roads. We ended up picking up this guy that was sort of walking down the dirt road. My guide had said that that was the chief of the Mursi tribe's son. He had been walking for hours to get back to his village. So we threw him in the back seat with my daughter and drove towards their village. I saw a bunch of grass huts, and then men came out of nowhere carrying AK-47s, and I'm thinking, holy shit, this is the real deal. They welcomed us like we were family. It was literally like stepping back into time. I felt like I was 2,000 or 3,000 years in the past. Mursi tribe, the women wear a clay lip, cattle horns on their heads, and literally all the guys over the age of 16 were carrying AK-47s, and that probably was one of the wildest travel experiences I think I've ever experienced.
Welcome to the Roaming the Earth podcast. I am your host, Drea Castro, and I'm here with Todd Snyder. Todd Snyder is the founder and CEO of Lost Faces of Humanity Foundation, an NGO focusing on the refugee crisis in East Africa. Todd has traveled to over 90 countries as a businessman, trailblazing photographer, and father whose socially conscious work sheds light on what many choose to ignore. His passion for capturing struggles and triumphs of the human spirit is the foundation of his unique artistic style. Todd leverages his relationships with over 20 years working in the international capital markets and finance to create pathways for significant change to assist the global refugee crisis while using his photography of over 5,000 refugees and thousands of internally displaced persons to create awareness of humanity. Thank you so much for joining us, Todd.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to know about this AK-47 situation. What did you do to get there and how did you feel?
It was a trip I had planned to East Africa with my daughter. We were planning on visiting Ethiopia, Tanzania, Zanzibar, Kenya, and ended up South Sudan. We ended up spending about a month. And it wasn't just all work. A lot of it was pleasure. And part of the pleasure was to visit the indigenous tribes of Ethiopia. So through Nat Geo, I hired a guide. And the guide, we chose prior to the trip, 6 or 7 of the tribes, indigenous tribes throughout Ethiopia. The Mursi tribe, which is on the border of South Sudan, one of the coolest group of people I've ever met in my life, was the first tribe that we had met. So I was a little jet lagged, low on coffee. It was super early in the morning. And our first night in Jinka, the guides picked us up, at the crack of dawn. We drove almost 3 hours towards the border of South Sudan to meet the tribe. And it was fascinating. One of the most adrenaline rushed experiences of our lives.
How old was your daughter at the time?
She was 14, so a couple years ago. Yeah.
I can't even imagine being a 14-year-old girl just, seeing this firsthand. That must have been such an incredible experience. Like, how do you come back to real life after that?
She's seen quite a bit. She's been to about 20 countries with me, and quite a bit of that. In fact, in Myanmar, we had witnessed folks carrying AKs, and a lot of the countries you go to, you'll see it, crossing into the borders and whatnot.
Can you tell me about why you started to do this journey photographing refugees, which, by the way, it's like my dream job. Like, I would love to travel the world and photograph something of social importance. I know another refugee photographer that I'm a big fan of, and I just admire what you guys do. So I'm just curious as to why you chose that path.
It's interesting, and that's asked quite a bit. 2016, I bought my first camera, and it was on a trip to Europe with my daughter, and the iPhone just didn't have the quality that I liked. So I bought a camera literally the day before I left, threw the manual away, and started photographing her on our trip and kind of, documenting our journeys through, I think it was about 7 or 8 countries that summer. And one of the things I've noticed on my travels since I was, 10 years old, that there was a lot of homeless people, displaced people, and in Europe, a lot of refugees scattered throughout. And they're from various countries, from Africa to Syrians to Iraqi refugees. And I found to be interesting. And so I started talking with a lot of them and started photographing them. And I found them to be fascinating, their stories. I mean, you'll come across doctors, teachers, very highly educated people that have been just displaced from their country. And that sort of started to sink in. And we were on a trip in Myanmar, Thailand, China back in 2017. And I'll never forget, we crossed the border into Myanmar and the Rohingya refugee crisis. And, I just witnessed some of the kids and the people that were crossing into the borders. And I said to myself, this is just not right. These are some of the nicest, kindest people on the earth. And then, you see a prime minister that has a Nobel Peace Prize and, she's allowing refugees to leave the country. And it didn't sit well, having spoken to and photographed quite a few of the people that, sort of wakened up my interest for Lost Faces of Humanity. The real cornerstone of the foundation was our trip to East Africa. And we were invited into the UNHCR refugee camps in East Africa. And I'll never forget, landing in Gambela, which is on the border of Sudan, and getting off the airplane. And it was just World Food Program, United Nations, and military planes. And we were in this little tiny, Ethiopian Airlines, I think it was a King Air. And just getting off the airport, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is the real deal. I hired a tut-tut, which is this little tiny 3-wheel cab that took us to the town from the airport. And it was this bouncy dirt road and, people on horses kind of passing us, and just a sort of a surreal experience. Checked into a hotel, the power was out, there was no air conditioning, no hot water. And, I loved every minute of it. And I'll never forget, the following morning driving into the camps. It was kind of an eye-opener. Ethiopia, one of the things I really love about that country, it's it's a republic, and it allows refugees to come into its borders. They honor the UN and the Geneva Convention. And I think at one time there was about 1 million refugees in Ethiopia. And we went into this first camp, and I'll never forget, there were 73,000 people in this camp. And, I think about 60% were kids, and they were younger than my daughter. And my daughter was just in shock. And we had bags of clothing and things like that we had brought from the States, and she started handing it out. And it was just an eye-opener, and then I learned shortly thereafter that a lot of these kids are orphaned. Their parents were killed in the South Sudan War between 2013 and 2020. And it was just something that kind of sank in. It just kind of shocked me. When we got the permits and the background checks and all that fun stuff to get into the camps, I had to apply for, my driver and my guide and then my daughter to get into the camp. And I'll never forget the Ethiopian ambassador. She looked at my daughter's passport and said, she's 13 years old. I can't let her in. And I conveyed to her that, she'd be safe. And she said, how can you assure that? And I said, well, she feeds the homeless here on Skid Row. And she asked me, you bring your kid to Skid Row? And I said, yeah, she feeds them every year. She said, well, if you bring your kids to Skid Row, I'm going to allow it, but be safe and be careful. Flash forward, it was me. It was just, I was in shock. I couldn't believe how kind the people were that were living in these camps, and yet that they're forgotten. And that our mainstream media just does not shed any light on this crisis. Seeing 73,000 people in these camps, dirt floors, UN's taking good care of them. However, there's not a whole lot of modern world amenities, and they're just sort of in limbo. So it's kind of an awakening. That's what really caused me to, dive in and form the foundation.
Was that before you formed the foundation, or were you?
Literally the day I got back, one of my clients is a former IRS agent, business manager, CPA that handles a lot of, 15 years with the IRS, and then 15 years he's been in the private sector for taxes and accounting and bookkeeping, and he handles a lot of people in the entertainment industry. Walked into his office and said, Don, I need to form a 501(c)(3). I said, I've got to, they want to, dive into helping the refugee crisis. So I gave him the name. The name was available. Then I gave him the mission statement. He said, this might take 6 months or so to get because of the process. He calls me up about 45 days into it. And he said, look at your email. So I opened my email, and he said, the IRS just granted you your 501(c)(3). And he says, my 30 years with the IRS, I've never seen it happen so quickly. It was about a 6-month process to get all the NGO status. And then finally, our Secretary of State signed off on it, and we're an official NGO. So kind of been diving into the alleviating the struggles of the refugees in these areas.
Is Ethiopia the largest refugee? I think it might be.
I think Turkey and Jordan quite a bit of Syrian refugees, and Ethiopia has quite a bit from South Sudan, Rwanda, and then there's quite a few from Mogadishu and some of those other areas. So primarily South Sudan. So.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like that's definitely not talked about. And like I said, I know other photographers as well, and we always find our calling. And it's just so nice to hear another photographer that's just like, I found this thing that I want, and then you went for it, and now it's like your life. It's such a beautiful thing to invest your purpose. That's your life's purpose. One of your biggest life's purposes is to go around and inform people, because a lot of us, we just live in our own bubbles. We don't really see what's out there, or we don't choose to see what's out there. So a photographer's job is really, really important. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's a passion. I figured that I've had 25 years in the capital markets. I've raised money for a lot of people that really don't deserve it. I figure, how about this chapter? Let's raise money for folks that really deserve it and need it. And walking through these camps, you'll find, highly educated, some of the smartest, most resourceful, kind people on the planet. And they're just sort of forgotten. And I think really the sin would be not to do something. And, the South Sudan war, it was between 2013, 2020, and it displaced about 4 million people. I think about 1 million or so internal, quite a few were killed. About 1 million or so ended up in Ethiopia.
I've never been to a refugee camp. So I heard that in those refugee camps, people kind of build their own communities. They start getting married. What does it look like?
There is a hierarchy. So there's, like tribal, and they break it up into different tribes because there's certain various tribes in some of these regions. There is a hierarchy. So there, some of the older gentlemen that, are in their 40s and 50s are kind of the camp leaders. The women do a lot of the heavy lifting. You'll see, hundreds of women kind of carrying, these massive water jugs, pots and pans throughout the camp, because water is really the key. I mean, one of the things people don't realize that a lot of these camps, there's no running water, sewers, things like that, things that we take for granted, power. The water hole is sometimes, 6 to 10 kilometers from where they live. So you'll see these young kids carrying these massive jugs of water back and forth. And one of the big problems is kids are having to carry basic necessities for survival instead of going to get education. Now, UNHCR and the United Nations offers, schools and education, and they do an unbelievable job. I mean, these agencies, how they manage, currently I think it's about 70.5 million refugees on our planet.
Wow.
And growing. This is pre-COVID, and it's just a massive undertaking. And World Food Program provides the food. World Health provides basic health necessities. And the niche we're looking for, and what Lost Faces of Humanity is kind of focused on, is kind of that boutique, blankets, school supplies, and then my ultimate goal is to bring education into the refugee camps. And yet, I want to take education from the refugees and bring those into our schools. I've asked my daughter, who's been into the camps with me, who's a high school student right now, and I said, what do you think would make these kids happy? Because they're, obviously happy. She said, obviously some of the things that we have at home, right now with COVID and all that, her education has been online. So my goal is to team up with tech companies where we can take the technology that is current and bring it into the camps. And yet these kids have so much to teach, and allow them to kind of share their stories with kids in the inner cities and with the cities around our country and world, that, hey, we're all one. Let's kind of learn together, and let's sort of discuss our future together. And that's sort of the vision of Lost Faces that we're working on right now.
When you travel, you're learning stuff, but they're also learning stuff. It's this like give and take. And honestly, like, I think I've learned more traveling to places like Nepal in the mountains with women that have to like work their asses off in the morning, get up at 5 a.m. and then try to overcome the adversity there, like stuff like that. It teaches you so much, and you come back and you're not the same. So I love that your mission is to kind of educate the next generation that's going to take over. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, it's fun just because, my daughter's passionate about it. Now she has some friends that are at school that want to help out. So, when all this COVID thing ends, I want to really focus on, the youth is our future. So focus on the youth in these camps and bringing the kids together. It was really kind of cool to see my daughter, handing out things to some of the kids in these camps, and an image that really just kind of haunts me. I'll never forget this girl about my daughter's age. There were about three of them, and they were kind of just sitting around talking, and the girls wanted to know what it was like in California. So my daughter brought out her iPhone and showed a picture of her dog, and I'll never forget these girls look at my daughter's dog, and then they wanted to see what California looked like. So my daughter showed some pictures of the Pacific Ocean, and these girls, they just like made their day. It was pretty wild just to see this interaction between a kid from the West and a kid from East Africa. It was really kind of special. So the goal is to kind of team up with the various camps and agencies where we can merge the kids and the humanity together and bring awareness. I think awareness can shorten this cycle. I think the average refugees in some of these camps about 17 years. A lot of these kids were born in the camps, and it's just it's an eye opener for sure.
Yeah, I believe that education is the key to a lot of the problems in the world, and having that awareness. If we could just educate everybody on whatever the issue is, we would solve a lot of different things. A lot of issues. Why are you passionate about travel? Obviously, you didn't start, just covering the refugee crisis, but what made you want to start kind of going around the world and exploring it?
It's a pretty cool planet. As a kid, I used to ride my bike to Canada. So I was about 10. I used to drive my bike across the bridge, and I have just had this sort of
Wait, where did you live? Because was Canada 500 miles, or was it a mile down there?
Upstate New York. So
okay.
Yeah, so it was a short jaunt, and I used to do that. And then post college, I moved over to I spent a summer in Italy, and that summer turned out to be 4 years. So
wow.
From Italy, I ended up sort of traveling quite a bit of countries, and it was just a great experience, an eye opener. And every chance I have, I kind of get on a plane, and I don't book for instance, I'll give an example. The last trip, my daughter, we used Istanbul as our base. So LA, Istanbul, and then from Istanbul, we planned our whole summer. So went to Istanbul, Greece, went up to London, went over to Italy, Ireland, and then, back down through England, and just sort of bounced around. I don't like to plan. I never stay in big chain hotels, not for me whatsoever. I like the boutique. When I'm in Africa, I rough it. It's, you're grateful to have, hot water, but, it's even better when you have water. And, I think you asked in my email, what are the necessities that I bring when I travel? And it's a headlamp, crazy glue, and maybe a little bug repellent, and, clean jeans.
Yeah, definitely with a bug repellent. I bring a headlamp with me for sure, because you never know. I tend to rough it. So I don't go to normal vacation spots usually, unless I'm being coerced to. I usually pick pretty rough places because I love it. I don't know what it is. I want to be uncomfortable. So I completely understand.
Yeah, it's the only way to go.
Tell me about your life now. What are you doing at the moment? Are you planning on I know with the whole COVID situation, things have changed, but are you planning on traveling anywhere?
As soon as the borders open up, in fact, I check every day. So as soon as they'll let us back into, Europe, I'm definitely, going to go back. My team's in Ethiopia, so I speak to my senior board members, and we have 2 staff members in Ethiopia. So I communicate with them on a regular basis. There is a quarantine in Ethiopia, and I think pretty much around the world. But as soon as things open up, I'm going back, and, I'm glad we're homeschooling now, because my daughter will come over with me we'll probably use Europe as our base, and then, bounce into Africa as soon as they'll have us back.
With all of your travels, with everybody that you've photographed, who is your most meaningful person that you've met or photographed?
Probably some of the kids in the refugee camps. There's a boy in one particular that, he lost his eye in South Sudan. He's one that, I really want to get back. And, I've talked to some doctors about helping with that eye. So that's one in particular. Bill Clinton was kind of a funny subject to photograph,
Yeah.
kind of accident, but it's a whole other story. And then I think some of the homeless people, that I photographed, probably photographed, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 throughout LA. And they're rather interesting, and their backgrounds are so diverse. People have no idea, just one wrong turn of luck and they're out on the street. And I find them to be a lot of them very educated. They just had a little bit of bad luck.
Yeah, we see that a lot in LA, like Skid Row especially. I know a few people that have ended up on Skid Row, normal, and then just made a right, made a wrong turn in life and then ended up over there. So it's just a very eye-opening experience. We don't have to travel outside of the country to see adversity.
Oh my gosh, you're so right.
Yeah.
1,000%. I find the more remote, the kind of the more interesting the people are.
Yes.
Yes. I try, I use a big city as a base just for a day or two. And then, I want to go where most people don't. That's kind of my, my mantra. So.
Yeah. Yeah. You photographed a lot of tribes. I'm actually planning on, I was supposed to go to Africa this year. I wanted to go to Tanzania and Kenya. And that was my goal. I was supposed to be there probably around now. And obviously everything happened and transpired. So that's not happening. But advice on how was that whole situation? Which tribe? Like, I don't know, any advice?
Well, when you're ready to go to Tanzania, I've got one of the most amazing guides on the planet.
Okay.
And he's amazing. And he, and my guides in Ethiopia are the same way. They're one of the coolest things about them is, they want to make sure my daughter is safe. And, it's funny. They're, years. I mean, I have guides in Cambodia and I'll get a message. How's Skylar doing? It's hilarious. I mean, they really look out after her. And Tanzania was interesting. One of the tribes in Tanzania, they're just very welcoming.
How do you choose who you photograph? Like you walk in, there's a ton of refugees or a ton of subjects and you go, I want to pick that person. What is it about them that you go, that's the person I'm going to go for?
It's just sort of an intuition, or maybe we choose each other. It's sort of maybe that eye contact, always permission in a sense. And the permission, a lot of times I don't understand the language and, it's just a verbal communication from I'll point to the camera and I'll point back at him and
you're like, can I?
They'll give me the thumbs up. And, I always want, permission to take their photo. That's really,
so you always ask, you always go, can I? Always.
Yeah. It's common respect. And, when I teach my daughter when we're in a foreign country, just act like you're in your grandmother's living room. Always treat the foreign country and wherever you're at as you're a guest in somebody's living room, and just show the respect. And that's really the key that I teach her and that I've always sort of used in traveling around the world. So just respect the cultures. When we're in, Islamic countries, I make sure she covers her head. She covers her arms. She's wearing pants. I want to honor the different cultures and the traditions. And it's really key to, I don't want to be that obnoxious, foreigner that's walking through a city or a village. So it's really kind of key, to our traveling.
A lot of photographers hope to do what you do. How do you go about doing this as a hobby? Advice for like an aspiring younger Todd?
Just, throw away the manual and the camera, and just go have fun. Let it happen, let it evolve, embrace the people. One of the things I love spending time with, some of the subjects. So we'll go into these different tribes, and it's real key to kind of, meet the people. I'll camp with them. I know in the Serengeti, that was another fun experience. We're sleeping in tents and there's lions and all kinds of critters. And
really,
yeah,
they're just out.
Yeah, I remember one night it was, lions all night rubbing up against the tent, and I slept maybe 10 minutes, only to wake up to a herd of elephants out in front of the tent, and it was probably the most magical moments of my life.
Wow.
Sleepless night.
Wow.
And I couldn't even get to the dining tent because there were, elephants, and we were told not to leave the tent until one of the it's the Masai tribe out of
The Masai Mari.
Masai Mara, and they walk around with just a stick, and I guess they fight off the lions with a stick if they come near you. But it was pretty special. Thank God for the East African coffee.
Yeah. How is that? Like, I can't even imagine a lion rubbing their body on my tent. I'd freak out. Also, I want to do it though.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
So are you in your tent alone? Like,
well, I had my daughter, and it was a real nice tent. Don't get me wrong. They had beds in the tents, and there was a little shower in the tents. Well, it's a bucket shower tent, so you have to kind of notify them by a walkie-talkie that you're ready to take a shower, and they heat up water on a fire and then put it on top of this ladder, and then you pull the string and you get a shower. I mean, it was pretty awesome. But there's bugs the size of your iPhone, so that was the one thing that kind of freaked my daughter out, were the bugs. So.
Are they in your tent? Like, I'm just so curious because I'm about to do this thing. Like, I'm probably going to do a very similar trip, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I would like to know some of the tips that you can give me. Like, do I have to look for lions outside of my tent? Like, is that normal?
One of the things in Tanzania and throughout East Africa, the people, they go out of their way to help you out. And, Tanzania especially. I mean, they're just friendly, and, they go out of their way to make sure you're, safe, comfortable. And they give you precautions. So just listen to the precautions. And one of the precautions is as soon as the sun goes down, close your tent, and, you're good to go. Just don't leave your tent in the middle of the night because the lions are out there. And one of the things I wanted to do was photograph the stars, because if you look up, you'll never see a brighter sky filled with stars. But I couldn't go out and photograph because of the lions. So that was the one restriction I had with the camera. That trip was no shots of the Milky Way.
Wow. It's so funny because I immediately thought, well, I want to go outside and take shots of the camp at night to see the Milky Way. That's exactly, well, how do I go out now? Because that's definitely something that I enjoy doing. Is I'll probably get out of my tent, take a photograph of whatever's going on. So I can't, that'd be so hard for me. But
that was a but I did not want to become
a meal?
Lion dinners. Yeah. A meal, yes.
So what is your most interesting travel story that you have? I'm sure you have so many, but I'd love to hear them.
It might have been, it was a trip, and this is a funny trip. I was with a girlfriend at the time, and I was in London visiting her. I had some business in London, and I had about 5 days off, and so did she. So we ended up in an Irish pub having a couple pints, and I ended up, she said, let's go somewhere tomorrow. I'm like, all right, great. So we took a map. True story, put the map on a dartboard, and wherever the dart landed is where we're going to go. So the dart landed in Morocco. So I got on my phone, and EasyJet has this amazing app. And I got on the app, and there was a flight that left from Gatwick to Marrakesh, at 6 a.m.
I've taken that flight. Gatwick to Marrakesh.
It was like $100.
It's great.
So, yeah, it's amazing. So we ended up going to the airport and sleeping at the airport. And I booked 2 flights. So we get to Marrakesh, and I'll never forget, I walked off the plane, and tears came to my eyes because I'm looking up, there's mountains filled with snow. It was cold, and yet Africa has this magical, certain parts of it have this magical smell where there's this wood that's burning, and it has this kind of, the smell I'm talking about?
Yes.
It's like spices and wood, and I was just like, wow. And we drive into Marrakesh, and it was literally like, an Indiana Jones movie on steroids. We check into this little hotel, and, we had no clue except we had, 5 days to have a good time. So we ended up going to the spice shop. These guys were trying to, oh, I have a brother that can take you to this place and take you to that place. I ended up giving him a little money. Then the brother doesn't show up the next day, and it was just beyond sketchy. And I'm just thinking to myself,
he never showed up. He never showed up.
He never showed up. I ended up, convincing him to give the money back, and that's a whole other story. I go back to the hotel, and this group just got back from this 5-day tour of Morocco, and the guide was there. So, I had a long talk with the guide. Come to find out, his dad was the former head of police for the city of Marrakesh. Super cool guy. He had a brand new car, and I'm like, how much to take us around the country? So, and we wanted to ride camels. So he said, well, I can do it for this amount. I'm saying, great. So we ended up jumping in the car with him, checked out of the hotel. And my girlfriend at the time, we drove towards Algeria, and, just touring Morocco it was unbelievable. There was snow, it was cold. And we ended up getting to this village on the edge of Algeria and jumped on some camels and decided to take this tour into the Sahara Desert. We rode camels 4 hours into the desert. It was freezing cold. Ended up, and there was this little tent city that they took us to 4 hours in. And I'll never forget, it was like this Casbah that, the music and singing and traditional Moroccan food, it was amazing. So we check into the tents, and I'll never forget crawling into the tents, and, it was cold and just amazing. But there were bed bugs in the tent.
No!
I got eaten alive, and I'm just, you know what? The hell with this. I ended up getting dressed, jumping out. I slept under the stars with the camels, and the camels made so much noise. I don't know if you've ever been on a camel, but they are the rudest, foulest, funniest animal out there. But
they are rude.
They're better than bed bugs. They're rude, but they're better than a bed bug.
It's true.
So I ended up, and the stars were and we went out and watched the stars all night. And they were shooting stars, and it was probably the most beautiful evening ever. And it was freezing. I think it was, probably in the 20s. And it was, in fact, the following day there was snow in the Sahara Desert. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, but it was awesome.
I went there, I think it was around June. It was hot. It was hot. We went to the Sahara, and it was in the middle of the desert. And there's a little tent village where I wanted to, it was on my bucket list. I was like, I gotta ride camels in the Sahara. That's my thing. There were tents, and then there was an actual small building in the middle of nowhere, and they had rooms in there or rooms in the tents. And I was like, no, I'm sleeping out in the tents because it's cooler. It's so hot inside. And then my cousin was so hot, she decided that she was going to pull out her mattress and put it on the sand underneath the stars. And I was like, you're crazy, snakes and stuff. I'm going in the tent. But it was a similar experience. It was a 5-day trip to Morocco, and we went all around the country. The one part of Morocco I didn't go to was Chefchaouen, which I'd love to go. Right? Yes. Did you do that one?
We did not. And that's on my list when I go back.
That is on the top of my list. I want to see Chefchaouen really bad.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think it was Chanel, or who was the designer that was his kind of palette? And then Burroughs wrote about it.
Yeah, I forgot who took that palette, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But it's I see photos of that, and I'm like, I need to go back to Morocco. Yeah. I loved it. That was one of my favorite crazy trips as well. It's so funny because I hear what you're saying, and I've done very similar things because I was in. Yeah, I was in England. I was in Gatwick, near Gatwick Airport, and my family lives in England, and I went to go visit them. And then I looked at my cousin. I'm like, let's go to Morocco or something, or go somewhere. And she's like, all right. So we looked up flights, and it was 30 pounds or something. Yeah. And I'm like, we're going to Morocco. Let's go tomorrow. And then we just
I think it was probably one of the most least expensive, amazing journeys ever.
Yes.
Because I think the driver and the car, and, it was, about $100 a day to tour this amazing country. And the culture, the people are just, beyond amazing. And the food.
Yes, the food.
Food is unreal.
The mint tea.
Oh, yeah. Mint tea all the time.
Mint tea. When we were in the Sahara, it was the hottest out of all the areas when we were in that desert. At night, I was sweating. And I remember them going, here's some hot mint tea. And I'm like, are you crazy? And they're like, yeah, it'll just make it cooler. And I'm like, all right, I'll drink it. And it actually worked. It worked. We talked about advice earlier, but is there a piece of life advice you can give to a younger you?
Well, yeah, I would say follow your heart, your instincts. Avoid assholes. That's the best advice I think my grandfather gave me as a young kid. Probably, just dive in there. Do what makes you feel happy. Don't listen to anyone except your own intuition. That's really, I think, the key. That's the advice I give my daughter. There's no perfect answer, but do what makes you feel right and treat everyone with respect. I think when you travel, that's the advice I was given and I always use. Just respect the culture and learn, listen, watch, view. We have this amazing planet and go out and experience it. I mean, I think the people on this planet are pretty amazing. The 90 countries I've been to have never had an issue with, knock wood, anyone. Well, I'll give you an example. The mainstream media at the time was talking how unsafe it is in some of these regions. And we go to these regions. I'll give an example. My daughter, she's been to 20 plus countries with me, and her favorite country yet to this date is Turkey. And at the time, they were Turkey's unbelievable. The people, I call it Italy on steroids. I think the people are just unbelievably amazing. The architecture, the food, the culture. My daughter could walk around alone. I mean, people were very super cool. And yet you watch the news and the news tells you, oh, it's not so safe and this and that. And it was anything but that. It was amazing.
I'd have to agree, because when I went to Turkey, it was, a few months after some kind of altercation that happened there where I was staying. And I remember asking my driver, because all I know is mainstream media, what's going on? Is it safe? And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. And it was. I ended up staying out till 1 a.m. walking around, and it was completely safe. And people were really kind. The food was amazing. It was an incredible experience. And actually, I have a question for you about your daughter. First of all, how is it traveling with her? You've traveled with her at such a young age to countries. Like, what is it like, and tips for parents that want to travel with their kids?
And I've been traveling with her since she was 8 years old or so. I think the most challenging, there she is over there, but the most challenging part is I found was getting her out of bed, getting a teenager out of bed in the Serengeti when you want to catch the natural light with the migration, and getting her out of bed, and I can't leave her in the camp. So she's got to come, but getting her out of bed is probably the biggest challenge. It's been a fun journey. We're both missing traveling right now. She has had very little complaints along the way. And I break it up. I let her stay in we'll stay in a nice boutique hotel, and then, I like to rough it. I think one of the hotels she didn't particularly care for in Jinka, Ethiopia. The power kept going out. There was no hot water. I think she was ready to check into something a little bit nicer.
Yeah. Sometimes roughing it is actually better than staying at a hotel, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no, I avoid any chains are not part of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
Travel affects me deeply. It has changed the course of my life. So I can't even imagine, as someone that's growing up in it, like, how does that affect you? Like, what is her goals later right now?
That's a great question. I think, obviously it's my job to show her the world, or, to show her as much as I can, and to let her experience, these amazing cultures and traditions. She, has seen a lot of the world. People in these cities have, kind of gone out of their way. They see, this guy, a single dad traveling with his daughter in some of these cities, and they've been super cool. I know, give an example, in Italy, on one of our first international trips, we went to see the Palo Horse Race in Sienna, Italy, which is the oldest horse race in the world. And there were no tickets available, but the hotel said if you get up early enough and you go into the center, it's free. So I got up early, 4 hours into it, and we're in the center. I'm literally front row, and the stadium fills up in Sienna of about 30,000 people.
Wow.
We're in the front, we're in the sun, drinking water, and I'm getting a little hot, and she had to use the restroom. And I think she was 9 or so at the time. And I promised her mom I'd never let her out of my sight. So I lived in Italy for about 4 years, and I never forget, there was a Carabinieri, which is the federal police, and he was there just making sure, the crowds were under control before the race took place. And she had to use the restroom. So I spoke a little Italian to this guy. I knew, I could trust him. And but I knew she'd have to be out of my sight for a little while. But if I left, we'd lose these seats that we waited 4 hours to get. It was just like, we were like sardines, but literally we were front row. And I spoke to him a little bit in Italian, and he actually, this federal police officer, took my daughter to the restroom and made sure she was okay. And he got her back to me. And, I'll never forget the, thanking him and the gratitude for that. We have a pretty cool planet.
There are bad people in the world, but I think the majority of the world is good.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we need to really focus on that. And I think the only way that you're really going to know that is by traveling. You really find out how kind people are. I've had a lot of experiences like that where you're like, I don't know if this might be shady, but I'm going to trust this person for some reason. And then it turns out to be a fantastic experience and an exchange. What's your most favorite location that you've ever been?
Wow.
You can only pick one. And why?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe the Serengeti, waking up to the sunrise in the Serengeti and just looking at this vast, it's just magic. That's probably one of them, and it's a special place to me. Maybe the people, maybe the light, maybe just knowing where I was, maybe the Hemingway first taking me there. I think that might be part of it. Peter Beard, the late Peter Beard, in his photographic journals, with the words of Karen Vixen and, out of Africa. I think part of that sunk into my soul, and then being there for the first time was sort of one of those wow moments. So, and I held off on Africa for a long time. I didn't want to go there with just anybody. So
yeah,
kind of,
yeah, it's a special place. It's such
absolutely.
It's literally my dream to go there. Like and specifically like Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, because I really love to see
Yeah, Uganda looks amazing.
Yes.
With the gorilla.
Yes. Yeah. It's hopefully next year, if we are okay and we can travel again. So
I talked to my guides. Dubai's starting to, they're opening up for tourism. So Dubai, Dubai's coming in for safaris now, and
nice.
Some of the Europeans are bouncing back in, so things are opening up, which I'm really glad, because their economy relies on tourism.
Yeah, so. I spoke to my guide in Nepal, and we actually have a good relationship. Like we'll talk about random things, and he was like, "It's so slow here. There's nothing. No one's here. It's crazy. No one's climbing Everest. Like no one's going around. Like, and I'm just." That's his whole life. So economy there is pretty hard on.
It's sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but hopefully it's starting. I think it's going to start to pick up for sure. So any tips and tricks for traveling to the Serengeti? Your favorite way to travel, or anything that you could, like, I'm going there. I'm probably going to go to the Serengeti. So what are you going to tell me what to do? How to travel there?
Just travel lightly. Picking the right guide is really key. If you Google safaris, the algorithms are set up, and one of the cautions is some of the safari companies, they, obviously pay quite a bit to be first on the Google list, and the algorithms put them up to the top, and you'll find a lot of these companies will just charge you quite a bit. So you have to be careful on which travel company that you go with. A lot of them really do. There's quite a bit of markup. So do a lot of research. Certain times of the year, like we went in December, which is a great time of the year. It's not too hot. The migration's taking place.
Yeah, I was about to say during the migration, right?
The migration was great. Yeah. In fact, I don't think I saw one mosquito the whole time, which was great. Yeah. And I think in certain times there's a lot more mosquitoes in the rainy season, things like that.
How do you travel during the migration? Like you're on land? You were on land?
Yeah, we were on land, and the guides knew, and I've got a guide who's been doing this for 30 or 40 years, so he kind of, they just know through satellites and experience and other guides. There's quite a bit of communication on the radio, and they know when the wildebeest and the animals are going to migrate. So it was really cool to follow this.
Wow.
And then my favorite was with the Masai, because the Masais are throughout the Serengeti, and they're just unbelievably beautiful, kind, and the history is pretty cool. In fact, my daughter, I usually eat whatever along the way. In Cambodia, I'd eat curb food. I'll eat curb food wherever. But the Maasai, one of their traditions is a yogurt mixed with cow's blood. And I'm one in Rome, but she's like, Dad, if you drink that or eat that, I'm going home. So that was the one thing I did not partake in. So
I heard that that's a thing there, the cow's blood situation, where they let bloodletting.
yeah, it's bloodletting. It's a little insertion in the neck, and it's a tradition. Their cardiovascular system is probably the best on the planet.
Yeah.
They win every marathon on planet Earth, and they seem to be the healthiest folks on the planet. But it's mixed with I think goat's milk. But she would not let me partake in that one.
No, I probably won't be partaking in that one either. Any other tips that you have? What tour company did you go with?
I interviewed quite a bit, and like anything, I don't go with the big names. So you'll never see me at Hyatt or Marriott. It was a boutique company that I, kind of found, and it felt right. And I was kind of Googling and sending out emails, and I can kind of send you some of the information. They're just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'd love to share that with everyone.
Yeah,
help out that company.
They're unreal. And in Ethiopia, Nat Geo kind of put me in touch with an amazing driver guide who was just unbelievable, and he spoke 5 of the languages, because Ethiopia, there's I think there's about 8 different tribes throughout Ethiopia, and he speaks most of the languages, which is very helpful.
Wow.
When traveling in that region. And you want to trust your guides. I mean, that's really key.
I mean, you have to.
Yeah, especially, with me, it's one thing, but, having a teenage daughter is another. So, and then I always register with the State Department in every country I go with. So that's one of the other things I do when traveling. One of my buddies is a former ambassador. And, one of the key things to do when you're traveling off, it's one thing to go to Paris and London, but it's another thing going into a country that may not have a huge presence with Western tourists. So, the State Department knows where I'm at all times. It's a key to making sure if anything went wrong, they know where you're at, kind of thing.
That's actually a good idea. I've never done that, so I should probably do that, considering that I always go off into some crazy places,
especially an off place and stuff like that. So
yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to going out there and exploring all those places. It seems like we have the same path, but I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, and I want to get to Tibet. That's that's on my bucket list.
That's on my bucket list too. And gosh, I don't know why I don't remember, but the Bhutan and Tibet.
Bhutan looks great.
Bhutan,
and Madagascar.
Yes,
Madagascar. I want to see the lemurs, and there's a zombie dance that they do in Madagascar. They dig up the dead after you die. A year later, they dig up your body and they pass the body around the village. So I want to get there and photograph it.
Where can we find you? Where can we find your organization?
It's lostfacesofhumanity foundation.org is my foundation. Or Todd_Snyder 1 on Instagram. That's where you can find me for now. Hopefully you'll find me soon in a remote place in Africa. So hopefully our borders will open up and, we go back to normal.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really the wish to the planet. So
yes, I hope that everything just, ends up equalizing in a new world, I don't know, normalizing somehow where we could go and travel and see one another and hug one another again. That's the goal.
Let's pray for that one. That's a true statement. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Todd, for joining me on the Roaming the Earth podcast, stories and adventures of people who are jet setters, nomads, and explorers. This is Drea Castro signing off. Join us again next time. Stay wild. If you're interested in hearing more stories from around the globe, don't forget to subscribe, share it to your friends, and follow me on Instagram on I'm Roaming the Earth.